for the hardest-hitting show in talk radio. The true progressive voice since 2012. This is Southpaws.
Welcome to Southpaws on the Pacifica Radio Network. We are the leaders of the revolution. I'm Darren Gibson, your host today. We have a lot to cover today. We have 2 Hammer Time Awards. Haven't dished out a Hammer Time Award in a while. Looks like the country might shut down as House Republicans are poised to reject the funding bill. So we'll see what happens there. Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear has signed an executive order banning the use of conversion therapy on minors in that state. So there you go there. That's good news. And we have to talk about some other voter stuff with the election coming up around the corner. 48 days away as we are recording on September 18th, 2024. This is Wednesday. Before we get into today's topics, let me go ahead and let you know how you can follow the show. You can do so on Facebook by going to facebook.com/Southpaws Radio Show. You can follow us on X at Southpaws Radio. You can follow us on Tumblr at southpawsradioshow.tumblr.com. You can follow us on YouTube and Mastodon by doing a search for Southpaws Radio. You can become a patron of the show by going to patreon.com/Southpaws Radio. You can listen to the show anytime at Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, Podcast Addict, Podvine, and Pandora by doing a search for Southpaws. Once you found our logo, you found us. We send links to our weekly episodes to our Facebook, X, Tumblr, YouTube, and Mastodon accounts. You can listen to us on Global Community Radio Channel 1 every Saturday night at 11 Eastern. And you can listen to us on great Pacifica stations, including KCEI in Taos, New Mexico, and KCGM in Kabul, Missouri. So be sure to listen to us on your local Pacifica affiliate. As I mentioned before, we are recording this show on Wednesday, September 18th, 2024. And you know what? Let's go ahead and let's start it off with this, our Hammer Time segment.
Stop! Hammer Time!
Yes, it is. It's Hammer Time. It's time to drop the hammer on the douchebag of the week. And since we have 2 winners, it is a double douche award. We don't have Wade Garrett chimed up quite yet. Well, we'll have to do that one of these days. Let me see here. Hammer Time winner number 1 this week is Ohio Sheriff, Portage County, Ohio Sheriff Bruce Zukowski. Listen to this story, folks. This should frighten the hell out of everybody. This is Raquel Coronel Urabe writing for NBC News. This is dated September 16th. A sheriff in Ohio who made disparaging remarks about Vice President Kamala Harris and immigrants on social media suggested that residents compile a list of addresses where they see yard signs in support of the Democratic presidential nominee. In a public Facebook post on Friday, Portage County Sheriff Bruce Zukowski used anti-immigrant rhetoric and denounced both Harris and her supporters. The post said, quote, "When people ask me what's going to happen if the flip-flopping laughing hyena wins, I say write down all the addresses of the people who had her signs in their yards. So when the illegal human locust, which she supports, needs places to live, we'll already have the addresses of their new families who supported their arrival," end of quote. Zukowski, the sheriff's office, and the Harris campaign did not immediately respond to requests for comment Monday afternoon. The post Zukowski shared also included TV images mentioning Aurora, Colorado, and Springfield, Ohio, towns that have become flashpoints in the immigration debate. Springfield in particular has become subject to security threats amid baseless claims about Haitian immigrants living there. Donald Trump amplified the claims at Tuesday's presidential debate, which drew more than 67 million viewers when he said, quote, "They're eating the pets," end of quote. NBC News refers to Donald Trump as former president. We don't do that on this show. Trump's running mate, Senator J.D. Vance of Ohio, has made similar remarks on social media, and he doubled down on them in an interview Sunday on NBC News' Meet the Press. Springfield Mayor Rob Rue has said a lie is tearing apart the city of nearly 59,000 residents. He said Saturday, quote, "We'd like that to stop," end of quote. Springfield is a little less than 200 miles southeast of Portage County. Zukowski's Facebook page includes a photo of him with Vance and other pictures of him with Trump allies such as former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn and former Republican presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy. The photo with Vance is dated July 15th. One of the photos with Flynn is dated June 13th. The other is dated March 30th and includes Ramaswamy. Yeah, so Bruce Zukowski is up for re-election this year. His opponent is Bob Fisher, I believe. And you need to vote for Bob Fisher. Get this clown, this racist clown, out of office now. He is dangerous. He is dangerous to any Harris supporter in the county. It's that simple, folks. It really is. And then so he is winner number one. Winner number two of Douchebag of the Week this week, Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana, Republican. This is Dara Gregorian of NBC News writing September 17th. Senator John Kennedy, Republican of Louisiana, repeatedly suggested a leading Arab American activist as a Hamas supporter when she testified Tuesday at a Senate Judiciary hearing on hate crimes, and he told her she should hide her head in a bag. If you haven't seen the video of this, it's disgusting. The activist, Maya Berry, said repeatedly that she did not support Hamas and was disappointed by the minutes-long exchange toward the end of a hearing called "A Threat to Justice Everywhere, Stemming the Tide of Hate Crimes in America." Kennedy said at the beginning of the exchange, quote, "You are the executive director of the Arab American Institute, are you not?" End of quote. She said she was and agreed with Kennedy that she is a Democratic activist. Kennedy asked, referring to the militant group behind the October 7th terrorist attacks in Israel, quote, "You support Hamas, do you not?" End of quote. The question prompted gasps and surprised laughs from the audience. Berry responded, quote, "Senator, oddly enough, I'm going to say thank you for that question because it demonstrates the purpose of our hearing today in a very effective way." End of quote. Kennedy then cut her off and insisted he needed a yes or no answer. Berry responded, quote, "Hamas is a foreign terrorist organization that I do not support, but you asking the executive director of the Arab American Institute that question very much puts the focus on the issue of hate in our country." End of quote. Kennedy continued, referring to the Iran-backed militant group, quote, "I got your answer and I appreciate it. You support Hezbollah too, don't you?" End of quote. She responded, quote, "I find this line of questioning extraordinarily disappointing," end of quote, before Kennedy said, "Is that a no?" End of quote. She said, quote, "I don't support violence, whether it's Hezbollah or Hamas or any other entity that invokes it, so no, sir," end of quote. Kennedy said, quote, "You just can't bring yourself to say no, can you? You just can't do it," end of quote. He then asked her whether she supported Iran and their hatred of Jews, and again she said no. He then noted her previous criticism of Congress for cutting funding to a United Nations agency known as UNWRA that is doing relief work for Palestinian refugees amid allegations a dozen of its 30,000 workers were involved in the October 7th attack. The workers were fired. Berry says she stands by her comments and supports UNRWA's relief work. Kennedy pressed, quote, "Let me ask one more time, you support Hamas, don't you?" End of quote. She said, quote, "I think it's exceptionally disappointing you're looking at an Arab American witness before you and saying you support Hamas. I do not support Hamas." End of quote. To gasps and yells from the audience, he concluded, quote, You know what's disappointing to me? You can't bring yourself to say you don't support UNRWA, don't support Hamas, you don't support Hezbollah, and you don't support Iran. You should hide your head in a bag, end of quote. In her opening statement, Berry said hate crimes in the country typically follow anti-immigrant rhetoric and noted that there was a surge of hate crimes against Arab, Muslim, and Jewish Americans since the October 7th attack. Asked by Senate Judiciary Chair Dick Durbin, Democrat of Illinois, whether she had anything she wanted to say after the Kennedy exchange, Berry said, quote, "It's regrettable that I, as I sit here, have experienced the very issue that we're attempting to deal with today," end of quote. She continued, quote, "The introduction of foreign policy is not how we keep Arab Americans or Jewish Americans or Muslim Americans or black people or Asian Americans, anybody safe. This has been regrettably a real disappointment, but very much an indication of the danger to our democratic institutions that we're in now," end of quote. Judiciary Democrats chastised Kennedy for his remarks later Tuesday on social media. Durbin said on X, quote, "Political leaders must not fan the flames of hatred and division. Jewish, Arab, Muslim, and Palestinian Americans all deserve to be treated safe, or all deserve to be safe," end of quote. Kennedy's office did not immediately respond to a request for comment, and of course he won't. Because all he does is he runs his mouth, interrupts witnesses, and so on and so forth. So to Portage County Sheriff Bruce Zukowski and to Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana, we have this message for you.
Don't be a douchebag.
Yeah, you got that right. You both of you are douchebags, and you need to shut up. That's period, end of story for you, especially you, Kennedy. Oh my God, these people drive me nuts. And that's going to do it for our Hammer Time segment this week. Let's get to our next story here. This is Scott Wong and Sadea Ashgar writing for NBC News. This is dated September 18th out of Washington. House Republicans on Wednesday are expected to derail their own plan to avert a government shutdown at the end of the month, with the party divided over the length of a short-term funding bill and what, if anything, should be attached to it. Speaker Mike Johnson's plan calls for extending funding at current spending levels for 6 months through March of 2025 and linking it with the SAVE Act, Donald Trump-backed legislation requiring that people show proof of citizenship to register to vote. The funding package is on track to fail given Republicans' razor-thin 220 to 211 majority and the fact that a number of GOP lawmakers, a mix of fiscal conservatives and defense hawks, have vowed to tank it. Democrats who want a clean 3-month funding patch with nothing attached and nearly all plan to vote no. Many oppose the SAVE Act, noting that it is already illegal and rare for non-citizens to vote. Wednesday's vote comes a week after Johnson, Republican of Louisiana, yanked the exact same funding package off the floor because it lacked enough Republican support, but he's decided to press forward again. Some conservatives said they never vote for stopgap funding bills, known as continuing resolutions or CRs. While Armed Services Chairman Mike Rogers, Republican of Alabama, has warned that a half a year is too long for military spending to remain stagnant. But the overwhelming majority of rank-and-file Republicans back Johnson's move, saying holding the vote will put lawmakers on record. After a closed-door meeting of House Republicans on Wednesday morning, Representative Warren Davidson of Ohio said, quote, "I think it's good to put it on the floor. Let people know who the people are that support it and don't. I think that's more important to call the vote. Let the record show who stands where. Everyone." End of quote. Davidson, who was ousted in July from the far-right House Freedom Caucus, lamented that Republicans have failed to unify behind a plan weeks before the election. He said, quote, "It's a combination of bedwetters who won't fight for anything and purists who won't fight for anything unless it's perfect." End of quote. Gee, bedwetters. Wow, I never thought I'd hear that from a sitting congressman. But then again, we're in the age of Trump, so anything goes, I guess. Addressing reporters at his weekly leadership news conference, Johnson defended his strategy but wouldn't say whether he would listen to Trump, who has called on Republicans to shut down the government if they can't pass the SAVE Act. Johnson said, quote, "We'll see what happens with the bill, all right. We're on the field in the middle of the game. The quarterback's calling the play. We're going to run the play. I'm very confident. I know that all the Republicans believe in election security. We have some people who dislike CRs. You know what? I dislike continuing resolutions as well." End of quote. Earlier, during an appearance on CNBC, the speaker said he wouldn't entertain thinking about what happens if the vote fails. Quote, "I'm not addressing Plan Bs." End of quote. The government is slated to shut down at 12:01 a.m. October 1st unless Republicans and Democrats can reach a deal on short-term funding. That won't include the Speaker's plan, which is dead on arrival in the Democratic-controlled Senate and faces a veto threat from President Joe Biden. Instead, the likely next step will be Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrat of New York, bringing to the floor a clean CR funding the government past the election into December. That would buy time for bipartisan negotiators to strike a longer-term funding deal during the lame duck session for fiscal year 2025 if a short-term bill can pass the House. Of the need to eventually pass a short-term patch, Representative John Duarte, Republican of California, said, quote, "Plan B's always been a clean CR," end of quote. With the November 5th general election just 48 days away, Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, Republican of Kentucky, is warning that a shutdown would be politically devastating for the Republicans. McConnell said Tuesday, quote, "One thing you cannot have at the government shutdown would be politically beyond stupid for us to do that right before the election, because certainly we'd get the blame," end of quote. House Appropriations Chairman Tom Cole, Republican of Oklahoma, said after Wednesday's meeting that he had complete faith in Johnson figuring out how to avert a shutdown, noting the Speaker reached a funding deal earlier this year with Schumer for the current fiscal year. Cole said, quote, "At the end of the day, if he ever wanted to shut down the government, he had a lot of opportunities to do that. Since he's been Speaker, he's never let it happen. I don't think he ever will," end of quote. So we'll see what happens with the continuing resolution, see if that gets passed and if it's a clean version. If it's clean, then I'm sure Biden will sign it right away. But if it's got the SAFE Act attached, you can forget it. That's a non-starter for Democrats, period. I tell you what, if the government does shut down, the one saving grace is that Social Security payments will not be affected by it. Those payments are automatic. Payroll for the U.S. Postal Service will continue on because they're a self-sufficient organization, in theory. But Congress keeps interfering with them. You know, the whole, you have to pre-fund 75 years worth of retirement in a 10-year period, and nobody else has to do that, just you guys, basically trying to break up the Postal Service and privatize it. That's all it is, folks. That's all that it is. All right, let's get to our next story here. This is Bruce Schreiner writing for the Associated Press. This is dated September 18th out of Frankfort, Kentucky. On Wednesday, Democratic Governor Andy Beshear banned the use of conversion therapy on minors in Kentucky, calling his executive order an overdue step to protect children from a widely discredited practice that tries to change a person's sexual orientation or gender identity through counseling. Usually it's more than counseling. It's usually beating the person, too, in extreme cases. The governor took action using his executive powers after efforts to enact a state law banning the practice repeatedly failed in the state's Republican-dominated legislature. During the signing ceremony at the Kentucky State House, Beshear said, quote, "My faith teaches me that all children are children of God, and where practices are endangering and even harming those children, we must act. The practice of so-called conversion therapy hurts our children," end of quote. As Beshear prepared to sign the order, someone shouted his opposition, saying, quote, "This is a denial of affirmation therapy," end of quote. Activists for mental health and LGBTQ plus rights drowned out the protester with cheers. The Family Foundation, a socially conservative group based in Kentucky, quickly denounced Beshear's actions, saying it tramples on the rights of parents and suppresses religious expression. David Walz, the group's executive director, said in a statement, quote, "This order, like previous failed legislative efforts, is designed to promote false LGBTQ ideologies and muzzle Christian counselors, therapists, and pastors from helping children struggling with sexual orientation or gender identity confusion." End of quote. Really? Anticipating such attacks, Beshear said his action, quote, "does not force an ideology on anybody. It simply stops a so-called therapy that the medical community says is wrong and hurts our children." End of quote. Right there's the truth. The executive order signed by Beshear bans the practice and makes it illegal to use state or federal funds to provide the therapy on minors. It also gives the state's Board of Licensure the authority to take action against anyone found to have practiced conversion therapy on minors and gives the board the authority to bring disciplinary action against anyone found in violation of the order. Such therapy has been discredited and is opposed by, among others, the American Medical Association and the American Psychiatric Association, citing research that shows it leads to increased risk of suicide and depression. Nearly half the states in the District of Columbia prohibit the use of conversion therapy with minors, according to Beshear's office. Chris Hartman, executive director of the Fairness Campaign, a Kentucky-based LGBTQ plus advocacy group, praised Beshear for taking bold action to protect Kentucky's LGBTQ plus youth from what he called the harmful practice of conversion therapy. He says the governor's actions send a clear message to Kentucky's LGBTQ plus kids and their families that, quote, "you are perfect as you are," end of quote. So good news out of Kentucky, and I praise Andy Beshear for signing that executive order. He took action where the repukes didn't want to, because we have to pander to our Christian base. Oh my God, Christians are just wonderful, lovely people. Yeah, this is what I think. Just because you sit in a church makes you no more Christian than sitting in a garage makes you a car. It's that simple, folks. It really is. All right, let's get to our next story here. This is Bernice Bautista writing for the Associated Press. This is dated September 17th out of Mexico City. There's been some backlash on rapper Nicky Jam for coming out in support of Donald Trump. This is great news here. The Mexican pop rock band Maná has removed its 2016 song with Nicky Jam after the Puerto Rican reggaeton singer expressed his support for Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump. The group said in an Instagram post, quote, "Maná does not work with racists," end of quote. In that post, they explained the decision to remove De Pies a Cabeza from online platforms. The song is a remix of the 1992 original included on Maná's classic album, Donde Jugaron los Niños. The band also wrote on Instagram, quote, "For the past 30 years, Maná has supported and defended the rights of Latinos in the world. There is no business or promotion that is worth more than the dignity of our people," end of quote. Nicky Jam, known for songs such as Travesuras, Voy a Beber, and the J Balvin collaboration X, expressed his support for Trump last Friday at a rally in Las Vegas. When introducing the singer, Trump seemed to mistake him for a woman. Quote, "Latin music superstar Nicky Jam, do you know Nikki? She's hot. Where's Nikki?" End of quote. He thought that he was a she. That's great. That's good stuff there.
That's not how it works. That's not how any of this works.
Yeah, that's right, Donnie. Oh, my God. That's funny. Despite the confusion, Jam expressed pleasure at meeting Trump, who since his first presidential campaign has promised to close the border and espoused harsh anti-immigrant rhetoric. Maná has supported the cause of migrants in the United States for more than 2 decades. In 2018, upon receiving the Latin Recording Academy's Person of the Year award, their vocalist Fiera Olvera promised, quote, "We will continue to fight for the rights of migrants who have made this country great. In the last century, they were the difference for this country to be as great as it is," end of quote. A representative for Jam did not immediately respond to the Associated Press's request for comment. A representative for Maná confirmed the band's statement but did not offer further details. Founded in Jalisco, Mexico, Maná has been awarded 6 Latin Grammys and 4 Grammys and is one of the most influential bands in Latin America. It also has a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. In addition to Maná, a long list of artists have requested that their music not be associated with or used by Trump. The lists of artists include ABBA, The White Stripes, Celine Dion, Bruce Springsteen, Rihanna, Phil Collins, Pharrell, R.E.M., Guns N' Roses, and the estate of Isaac Hayes. Trump won't be able to play anything except Lee Greenwood when he gets done, when the smoke settles. I love it. This is great stuff. Trump gets in more trouble by opening his mouth and doing things he shouldn't be doing. This is wonderful. I love it. I love all of it. I swear. All right, let's get to our next story here. This is Matt Brown and Darlene Superville writing for the Associated Press. This is dated September 17th out of Philadelphia. Vice President Kamala Harris on Tuesday decried Republican Donald Trump for inflammatory rhetoric about migrants in Springfield, Ohio, and on other topics, saying voters should make sure he, quote, can't have that microphone again, end of quote. Sitting down for a rare extended campaign interview Tuesday with a trio of journalists from the National Association of Black Journalists, Harris said her heart breaks after threats of violence have disrupted the city following comments amplified by Trump and his running mate, alleging without evidence that immigrants are kidnapping and consuming people's pets. 2 days after Secret Service agents foiled an apparent assassination attempt on Trump, who blamed Democratic rhetoric for the latest threat to his life. Really? Yeah. Bullshit. It's not Democratic rhetoric. It's your rhetoric that causes violence there, you orange. Continuing, Harris said that, quote, there are far too many people in our country right now who are not feeling safe, end of quote. She referenced the threats to immigrants, but also the conservative Project 2025 blueprint for the next Republican administration and a Republican-led effort to restrict abortion access. She said, quote, not everybody has Secret Service. Members of the LGBTQ community don't feel safe right now. Immigrants or people with an immigrant background don't feel safe right now. Women don't feel safe right now, end of quote. Harris said she personally has confidence in the Secret Service and feels safe under their protection. She spoke briefly with Trump on Tuesday to express her gratitude that he was safe, but in the interview said his rhetoric should be disqualifying. Without mentioning Trump by name, Harris said, quote, when you have that kind of microphone in front of you, you really ought to understand at a deep level that your words have meaning. Let's turn the page and chart a new way forward and say you can't have that microphone again, end of quote. Harris said the Republican attacks on the city and migrants were, quote, lies that are grounded in tropes that are age-old, end of quote. The sedate interview in Philadelphia stood in contrast to Donald Trump's appearance before the same organization just a month ago, which turned contentious over matters of race and other issues. The Trump interview opened a chapter in the campaign in which the Republican candidate repeatedly questioned Harris's racial identity, baselessly claiming that she had only belatedly turned black at some point in her professional career. Trump has since repeatedly questioned Harris's racial identity on the campaign trail and during their September presidential debate. Harris, the daughter of a Jamaican father and an Indian mother, has repeatedly dismissed Trump's remarks as, quote, the same old show, end of quote. During her September debate with Trump, she said it was a tragedy that he had, quote, attempted to use race to divide the American people, end of quote. The vice president insisted she is working to earn the vote of black men and not taking any constituency for granted. Black male voters are traditionally one of the most consistently Democratic-leaning demographics in the nation, but Republicans have tried to make inroads while Democrats worry about flagging enthusiasm at the polls. Harris said, quote, I think it's very important to not operate from the assumption that black men are in anybody's pocket. Black men are like any other voting group. You got to earn their vote. So I'm working to earn the vote, not assuming I'm going to have it because I'm black, end of quote. Harris declined to say if she supported reparations for descendants of slaves, but said, quote, "We need to speak truth about the generational impact of our history in terms of the generational impact of slavery, the generational impact of redlining," end of quote. She expressed openness to studying the question, quote, "to figure out exactly what we need to do," end of quote, but said her focus was on building economic opportunity. In Trump's interview with the NABJ, he lambasted the moderators and drew boos and groans from the audience at times. The interview also sparked debate within the NABJ convention itself, which operates both as a networking and communal space for black professionals in media, as well as a newsmaking event. As with Trump's appearance, the audience was made up of NABJ members and college students, but the tenor was markedly different. Where Trump called the reporters interviewing him rude, nasty, and denounced their questions as horrible, Harris referred to the reporters who pressed her as, quote, "esteemed journalists," end of quote. The crowd was inaudible throughout the Tuesday interview with Harris. In July, Trump's comments were often met with laughter, shock, and confusion from the room, which largely consisted of student journalists and media professionals outside political news. Trump, his running mate Ohio Senator J.D. Vance, and other Republicans have criticized Harris for largely avoiding media interviews or interacting on the record with reporters who cover her campaign events. She and her running mate, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, gave a joint interview to CNN last month. Her campaign recently said she would be doing more local media, and last week she sat for her first solo television interview since becoming the Democratic nominee, taking questions from a Philadelphia station. Asked whether Americans are better off today than 4 years ago when she and President Joe Biden entered office, Harris did not directly answer the question, instead referencing the state of the economy during the COVID-19 pandemic and bringing up her plans to try to lower housing costs and promoting herself as a new generation of leader. Harris said her candidacy offers the country a chance at, quote, "turning the page on an era that sadly has shown us attempts by some to incite fear to create division in our country," end of quote. Janiyah Thomas, black media director for the Trump campaign, said Harris's remarks to the National Association of Black Journalists on Tuesday revealed her record of failures for black Americans. Thomas said, quote, "She told the NABJ that after 3.5 years of her failed policies, grocery prices are too high and the American dream is unattainable for young Americans. We can't afford 4 more years of Kamala Harris. It's time to put President Trump back in the White House and restore economic prosperity," end of quote. Really? Economic prosperity, my ass. Yeah, high unemployment, out of control spending, record deficits, you name it, Trump did it. And he's a rapist and a racist. Sorry, he is. Harris has largely sidestepped traditional media appearances and instead focused on rallies, grassroots organizing, and social media engagement, where the vice president can sidestep questions from independent journalists about her policy record and proposed agenda. Tuesday's event was moderated by Eugene Daniels of Politico, Garen Keith Gaynor of The Griot, and Tanya Mosley of WHYY, a Philadelphia area public radio station that co-hosted the gathering. Asked whether she would change U.S. policy toward the Israel-Hamas war, Harris said she endorsed Biden's pause on 2,000-pound bombs to Israel and didn't signal any daylight with the president. Harris noted that the killing of Israeli civilians and some Americans by Hamas on October 7th and added that far too many, quote, "innocent Palestinians have been killed," end of quote, in Israel's response. She added that the Israel-Hamas war has to end and a ceasefire and hostage deal must get done, while calling for a two-state solution to the Israel-Palestinian conflict. She said the goal is to ensure, quote, "the Israelis have security and Palestinians in equal measure have security, have self-determination and dignity," end of quote. NABJ noted the importance of hosting the conversation in Philadelphia, a major city in a battleground state with a large black population. Philadelphia was also the home to one of the major precursor organizations to the NABJ. For years, the association has invited both major presidential candidates to speak before the convention. Presidents George W. Bush, Barack Obama, and Joe Biden all attended NABJ events as presidential candidates or while in office. So there you go, folks. The NABJ doing a great job, an incredible job of sorting through the facts here. All right, let's get to our next story here. This is somebody we don't talk about enough, but somebody whose name you might be hearing in the future. This is Stephen Groves writing for the Associated Press. This is dated September 18th out of Mitchell, South Dakota. The gold leaf ceilings and crystal chandeliers of Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago resort are a long way from the small town of Murdo, South Dakota, where Senator John Thune grew up. But that's where the senator found himself this spring as he launched a bid to become the next Senate Republican leader. Even before Senator Mitch McConnell, Republican of Kentucky, announced he would end the longest leadership tenure in Senate history, the 63-year-old Thune had approached the contest with the same quiet intensity, fueled by an aversion to losing he learned on the basketball court and track of Murdo's high school. The outcome of the secret leadership ballot expected after the November election is deeply uncertain. It's a weighty choice for Senate Republicans as they leave the McConnell era, creating a test of whether someone like Thune, who defines himself by the party's traditional values and has at times defied Trump's wishes, can still rise to power. Senators John Cornyn of Texas, a former whip and strong fundraiser, and Rick Scott of Florida, a Trump ally, are also running for leader. Others could still jump in the race. Thune acknowledges moments of doubt about his place in the party. He agonized over whether to run again in 2022, even as a clear path to Senate leadership awaited him. Of his deliberations, Thune said, quote, "You tire of just the day-to-day combat. I may not be best suited to the times in terms of the style, the way I do things, but I just felt like the country was going to need some common sense leadership, particularly if Senator McConnell stepped aside," end of quote. So it was that Thune made the journey to Mar-a-Lago. It's his hope the visit, along with his endorsement of Trump for president, will help convince Trump they can work together. Thune told the Associated Press he views their potential relationship, quote, "very professionally," end of quote, and if they both win their respective elections, quote, "then we've got a job to do," end of quote. Thune added with a chuckle, quote, "I think he understands where I'm coming from, so we'll see what happens," end of quote. Throughout his political career, the South Dakota Republican has shown an athlete's grit and sense for being in the right place at the right time. He struck up a mentorship in high school with former South Dakota Senator James Abdnor that led to his start in politics. He came back from a gut-wrenching 2002 Senate race loss to successfully challenge then Senate Majority Leader Tom Daschle, a Democrat, and rise to hold the Senate whip position, number 2 in GOP leadership. This year, Thune, much like he ran the 800-meter race in high school, has jumped out to a pace meant to exhaust his rivals. He pledged a record-setting $4 million to the Senate's Republican campaign arm, held meetings this spring with every colleague in lock support, and crisscrossed the country to boost Republicans' bid to win a Senate majority. But the drive to become leader has forced Thune into a delicate pose, contrasting Trump's style of politics but stopping short of the direct confrontations that have ended the careers of other Republicans. Thune's rebuke of Trump in late 2020, in which he asserted that Trump's efforts to overturn his election loss would, quote, "go down like a shot dog," end of quote, in the Senate, prompted Trump to try unsuccessfully to recruit a primary opponent against him in 2022. Now, Thune argues that Trump can be trusted with the presidency while acknowledging the transfer of power, quote, "was hard, painful, and tumultuous in many ways. I think with respect to democratic norms, my expectation is that he's going to follow them. He's going to do things clearly his own way," end of quote. He continued, quote, "stylistically, it might not be the way I would do it or the way any other former president has done it, but in the end, the Constitution, the rule of law, governs this country. That's our bedrock principle, and we can't deviate from that," end of quote. Thune also just hates to lose. He grimaced when discussing his 2002 Senate race loss by 524 votes tallied late into election night. He choked up when recalling how his coach comforted him as he sat in the locker room after his potentially game-winning shot clanked off the rim in the final seconds of his high school basketball career. When it came to basketball, a sport his father, a decorated World War II fighter pilot, had played at the University of Minnesota, Thune never held back. Chris Bernard, who played center alongside Thune for the Jones County Coyotes, said, quote, he would do whatever it took to win, end of quote. On winter nights, the basketball games drew practically the entire town of Murdo, population less than 1,000, and a pit stop for truckers and tourists making the crossing between the Missouri River and the Black Hills. Thune's father, Harold, a teacher and a girls' basketball coach at the high school, would take his sons to the gym on Saturday mornings to sharpen their skills. Thune still remembers the game he scored 36 points, yet his dad, who hated ball hogs, singled out a play when he took a shot rather than pass to Bernard, who was open under the basket. Thune said, quote, my first instinct was always score. A lot of times he would try and constrain that impulse, end of quote. Thune's sense of the world was also formed by the evangelical Christian faith he inherited from his parents. He and his siblings attended Biola University, a Christian college in Southern California. Thune said those lessons compelled him to seek a life of purpose while approaching politics with kindness and truth. Like many, the Thune family was drawn into the Republican fold by President Ronald Reagan and his skepticism of big government. Thune remembers casting his first vote for Reagan and liking how he exhibited, quote, a sense of humor, a lightness of spirit, and a joyfulness, end of quote. In over a dozen interviews, colleagues, former staff, and friends described Thune as a driven competitor, yet someone who also values forthrightness, teamwork, and humility. Former Senator Bill Nelson, who led Democrats on the Senate Commerce, Science, and Transportation Committee while Thune was chair from 2015 to 2019, said, quote, John is a first-class gentleman, end of quote. As he worked the crowd at a fairground in South Dakota on a recent August day, it was easy to see why Thune was encouraged by Republican Senate colleagues to explore a 2012 presidential run he did not ultimately pursue. Lean with a smile that spreads over a chiseled face, Thune slapped backs, recalled names, and grasped hands with a firm grip. People felt comfortable enough to call out John, and the senator received a good-natured ribbing when he accidentally cut in line to put barbecue sauce on his ribeye sandwich. But the Republican Party has changed since 2012. During another visit with the Sioux Falls Volunteer Club, one man wanted to know, what are you doing to get Trump back in the White House? Thune began, quote, well, we're doing everything we can, end of quote. The reply came, quote, no, I want to know what you are doing, end of quote. With elections approaching, Thune is tapping into the mentality of an 800-meter runner on the final lap. He said, quote, it's a brutal race, but you've got to gut it out, end of quote. All right now let's get to our next story. This is Colleen Long writing for the Associated Press. This is dated September 18th out of Washington. And we're going to play the audio for this. A 22-year-old woman who became an abortion rights advocate after she was raped by her stepfather as a child tells her story in a new campaign ad for Democratic presidential nominee Kamala Harris. Hadley Duvall says in voiceover that she's never slept a full night in her life. Her stepfather first started abusing her when she was 5 years old and impregnated her when she was 12. As she speaks, images of Duvall as a child flash on the screen. The soundtrack of the ad is a song by Billie Eilish, who endorsed the vice president on Tuesday. Here's the ad right now.
I've never slept a full night in my entire life. I was 5 years old when my stepfather abused me for the first time. I just felt like I was alone on a planet with a monster. I was 12 when he impregnated me. I just remember thinking, I have to get out of my skin. I can't be me right now. Like, this can't be it. I didn't know what to do. I was a child. I didn't know what it meant to be pregnant at all. But I had options. Because Donald Trump overturned Roe v. Wade, girls and women all over the country have lost the right to choose, even for rape or incest. Donald Trump did this. He took away our freedom.
I'm Kamala Harris, and I approve this message.
The ad is part of a continued push by the Harris campaign to highlight the growing consequences of the fall of Roe, including that some states have abortion restrictions with no exceptions for rape or incest. Women in some states are suffering increasingly perilous medical care, and the first reported instance of a woman dying from delayed reproductive care surfaced this week. Harris lays the blame squarely on Republican nominee Donald Trump, who appointed 3 of the conservatives to the U.S. Supreme Court who helped overturn the constitutional right to abortion. Duvall blames Trump, too, as you heard in the campaign ad. During the presidential debate on September 10th, Trump repeatedly took credit for appointing the 3 Supreme Court justices and leaned heavily on his catch-all response to questions on abortion rights, saying the issue should be left up to the states. He said he would not sign a national abortion ban. And if you believe him, I've got a bridge to sell you. He said, quote, "I'm not signing a ban. There is no reason to sign the ban." End of quote. Bullshit. He's going to sign a ban. You can believe it. But he also repeatedly declined to say whether he would veto such a ban if he were elected again, a question that has lingered as the Republican nominee has shifted his stances on the crucial election issue. Duvall of Owensboro, Kentucky, first told her story publicly last fall in a campaign ad for the governor's race in her home state supporting Democratic Governor Andy Beshear. Duvall's stepfather was convicted of rape and he is in prison. She ended up miscarrying the fetus. Beshear won re-election, and Democrats have said Duvall's ad was a strong motivator, particularly for rural male voters who had previously voted for Trump. Duvall is also touring the country to campaign for Harris along with other women who have been telling their personal stories since the fall of Roe, joining Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro last week. Oh, I love this. I hope this ad by Hadley Duvall spreads far and wide. I haven't seen it on television in Michigan yet. I've seen it on the internet. That's where we got the audio from. So when this ad comes out, you women, especially you pro-choice women, you better watch it, you better listen, and you better vote accordingly. And while we're talking about the topic, I'm just going to say this, and I'm going to be blunt. I talked to you several weeks ago about a friend of mine who had an abortion. I should know, I was the one that took her there. I was the one that brought her back home. I was the one that watched her pets while she was having the procedure done. Is now voting for Trump. How do you confront somebody like that without outing them by name and saying, you had an abortion? Why are you voting for a pro-life son of a bitch like Trump? Honestly, you can't do it. You really can't. You know, you can out her privately and you can say, look, I know what you had done years ago. I was there for you when you had it done. I took you there. I brought you back home. Why the hell are you voting for this son of a bitch right now? And that's the kind of questions that you need to be asking your friends that are voting for Trump, ladies. Your female friends that are voting for Trump. What is so appealing about him? That's what I'd like to know. What is so appealing about him? Oh, he's going to help the economy. No, he isn't. He is not. He is not. He is a hindrance to the economy. Well, I just like what he says. Oh, really? You can forget that, too. He's a moron. He's a senile old man. I'll call it like it is. So I tell you what, I'm in a quandary. What do? Do you confront this person and lose a friend? Or do you just let it go and chalk it up to stupidity? You know what? I want your opinions on this. And you can send them to me, southpawsradio@gmail.com. I will read your responses on the air. So please write to me. Let me know what I should do. All right, let's get to our next story here. This is Summer Ballantyne and Steve LeBlanc writing for the Associated Press. This is dated September 17th out of Jefferson City, Missouri. The FBI and the U.S. Postal Inspection Service on Tuesday were investigating the origin of suspicious packages that have been sent to or received by elections officials in more than 15 states, but there were no immediate reports of injuries or that any of the packages contained hazardous material. The latest packages were sent to election officials in Alaska, Colorado, Georgia, Indiana, Kentucky, Massachusetts, Missouri, New York, and Rhode Island. Mississippi authorities reported a package was delivered there Monday, and the Connecticut Secretary of State's office said the FBI alerted it of a package that was intercepted. Agency spokesperson Kristen Satera in Boston said in a statement that the FBI is collecting the packages, some of which contained, quote, an unknown substance, end of quote. She added, quote, we are working with our partners to determine how many letters were sent, the individual or individuals responsible for the letters, and the motive behind the letters. As this is an ongoing matter, we will not be commenting further on the investigation, but the public can be assured safety is our top priority, end of quote. I can tell you what the motivation is. They're trying to intimidate election workers. Duh! It's really that simple. We don't know what the motivation is. Well, anybody with a brain can see what the motivation is. Unbelievable. It's the second time in the past year the suspicious packages were mailed to election officials in multiple states. The latest scare comes as early voting has begun in several states ahead of the high-stakes elections for president, Senate, Congress, and key state house offices, causing disruption in an already tense voting season. Local election directors are beefing up security to keep workers and polling places safe while also ensuring that ballots and voting procedures won't be tampered with. The National Association of Secretaries of State condemned what it described as a disturbing trend of threats to election workers leading up to November 5th, as well as the second apparent assassination attempt on Donald Trump. The group said, quote, this must stop, period. Our democracy is no place for political violence, threats, or intimidation of any kind, end of quote. The Colorado Secretary of State's office said a package containing white powder and with the sender listed as U.S. Trader Elimination Army was intercepted at a mail facility. It said the package was similar to those sent to other states and that early indications suggest the powder was harmless. On Tuesday, the FBI notified the Massachusetts Secretary of the Commonwealth's office that Postal Service inspectors had identified a suspicious envelope delivered to a building housing state offices. The package was intercepted. Packages also were sent to secretaries of state and election offices in Iowa, Kansas, Nebraska, Oklahoma, Tennessee, and Wyoming this week. The packages forced evacuations in Iowa, Oklahoma, and Wyoming. Hazmat crews quickly determined the material was harmless. The Mississippi Secretary of State's Elections Division said it received a package similar to those sent to other states and said that the State Department of Homeland Security was testing it. The division said it has notified county election officials to be on the lookout. Oklahoma officials said the material sent to the election office there contained flour. Iowa Secretary of State Paul Pate said in a statement after the evacuation of the 6-story Lucas State Office building in Des Moines, quote, we have specific protocols in place for situations such as this, end of quote. A state office building in Topeka, Kansas was evacuated due to suspicious mail sent to both the Secretary of State and Attorney General. That's according to a statement written by Kansas Highway Patrol spokesperson April M. McCullum. Topeka Fire Department crews found several pieces of mail with an unknown substance on them, though a field test found no hazardous materials, spokesperson Rosie Nichols said. Several employees were exposed to it and were being monitored. In Oklahoma, the state election board received a suspicious envelope in the mail containing a multi-page document and a white powdery substance, agency spokesperson Misha Moore said. Testing determined the substance was flour. State workers in an office building next to the Wyoming Capitol in Cheyenne were sent home Monday pending testing of a white substance mailed to the Secretary of State's office. Suspicious letters were sent to election offices and government buildings in at least 6 states last November, including the same building in Kansas that received suspicious mail Monday. While some of the letters contained fentanyl, even the suspicious mail that was not toxic delayed the counting of ballots of some local elections. One of the targeted offices was in Fulton County, Georgia, the largest voting jurisdiction in one of the nation's most important swing states. 4 county election offices in Washington state had to be evacuated as election workers were processing ballots cast, delaying vote counting. The letters caused election workers around the country to stock up on the overdose reversal medication naloxone, in case it turns out to be fentanyl that they're sending in the mail. Election offices across the United States have taken steps to increase security amid an onslaught of harassment and threats following the 2020 election and the false claims that it was rigged. Well, I tell you what, I've got a message to the person sending these packages and letters. I'm going to tell you this very succinctly. The U.S. Postal Inspection Service always gets their man. They're not the FBI. They got the Postal Inspection Service has a higher number of arrests as a result of investigations and higher number of guilty verdicts and sentences as a result. Don't mess with the U.S. Postal Inspection Service. I got news for you. Don't do it. Don't be stupid. All right, I want to get to our final story today. This is Adriana Gomez-Lyson and Will Weissert writing for the Associated Press. This is dated September 17th out of West Palm Beach, Florida. Donald Trump was not harmed in Sunday's apparent assassination attempt as he golfed near his Florida club, but the second attack on his life in barely 2 months is likely to further unsettle an election cycle already marked by upheaval. The man suspected in the incident, Ryan Wesley Routh, camped outside the golf course in West Palm Beach with food and a rifle for nearly 12 hours, according to court documents filed Monday. He is accused of lying in wait for Trump before a Secret Service agent opened fire, thwarting the potential attack. So Routh, who is 58 years old, faces charges of possessing a firearm despite a prior felony conviction and possessing a firearm with an obliterated serial number. Additional charges are possible. The suspect lived in North Carolina for most of his life before moving in 2018 to Ka'awa, Hawaii. He and his son operated a company building sheds, according to an archived version of the webpage for the business. The attempt was thwarted when authorities spotted a firearm poking out of shrubbery on the West Palm Beach golf course around 400 to 500 yards from where Trump was playing. Trump was moving through the fifth hole's fairway. An agent who was visually sweeping the area of the sixth-hole green saw the subject armed with what perceived to be a rifle and discharged his firearm. That's according to Acting Director of the Secret Service, Ronald Rowe, Jr. Rowe said that Routh did not have a line of sight to Trump and did not fire at Secret Service agents before fleeing. So there you go, folks. Another assassination attempt on Donald Trump. This is just absolutely ridiculous. I don't know why people keep trying to do this. You're not going to get away with it. Just stop. Just stop. You're going to get caught. You absolutely are going to get caught every single time that you try this. So for the next person that wants to try this, you're going to get caught. Don't do it. Just put it out of your mind. If you want to get rid of Trump that bad, go to the polls and vote on November 5th, or vote early if you can do that in your state. That's it for this week. We'll be back next week. I'm Darren Gibson. Please support independent media, the First Amendment, and a woman's right to choose.
The stations that carry Southpaws do not necessarily share the opinions expressed on the show. Southpaws is protected by the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution and is copyrighted by Big D Entertainment. All rights reserved.